Acquiring a business? BizNexus simplifies it. Access thousands of updated opportunities in our DIY marketplace or supercharge team sourcing with OmniSource, your all-in-one platform for on-market, off-market, and coming soon deals. Scale smarter today. Learn more or book a demo at www.biznexus.com.
Disclaimer from the always present legal team. Podcast conversations don't necessarily reflect the views of BizNexus Incorporated. Everything you hear is informational news and updates from around the industry. We're not recommending any investments. We're not offering any investment advice. Be sure to do your own homework.
All right, get ready to dive in. Today we're tackling buying an existing business.
Yeah, perfect for anyone who's thought about taking over instead of starting from scratch.
Right, and for this deep dive, we're looking at a guide that covers pretty much everything.
From figuring out if a business is even worth it to the legal stuff and making the purchase.
By the end, you'll know a lot more about the good, the bad, and all the steps in between.
Okay, so what usually makes buying a business attractive? It seems like a quick way to get going.
You already have a product, customers, maybe even a team. No more startup stress.
Right, you get that built-in goodwill. It's more than just the stuff you buy, it's the name, the reputation.
Makes sense. You're buying an established customer base, too.
Exactly. But, and this is important, goodwill isn't always good. We've got to talk about negative goodwill.
Uh-oh, that sounds kind of scary. What is that?
Imagine you buy a restaurant that looks great from the outside. Busy, good location, everything. But the kitchen is ancient.
Everything needs replacing. That's a nightmare.
Exactly. Negative goodwill is like inheriting someone else's problems, things that actually lower the value.
Like buying a used car that needs a new engine the second you drive it off the lot. You end up spending more than you saved.
Perfect analogy. That's why due diligence is so important. You have to know what you're getting into. Lawyers, accountants, even specialists for that industry.
So get a team together to help you see the true value and find any hidden problems.
Right. Think of it as buying peace of mind. Because once you sign, those hidden problems become your problems.
Makes sense. So let's say we have our team. How do we figure out what a business is actually worth? It can't just be the asking price.
You're right, it's more complicated. There are a few ways to value a business, and which one is best depends on the business and the sale.
Okay, so what are the main ways to put a price on a business?
There are three main methods. First, the asset approach. This looks at what the business owns: property, equipment, inventory. It's good for businesses that aren't making huge profits, like holding companies.
So you add up everything they own and subtract any debts to get a starting point.
Exactly. A common method is adjusted net assets. Just what you said. Assets minus liabilities.
Got it. Pretty straightforward. What are the other approaches and when do you use them?
The next one is the income approach. This gets a little more tricky. You value the business based on how much it could earn in the future. Think about a consultancy. Their value is in their expertise, not their office furniture.
Right, they're selling a service, not just things. But how do you know what they'll earn in the future?
It's definitely not perfect. But a common method is capitalization of earnings. You look at current earnings plus how risky the business is and how much it could grow.
So a business that could grow a lot and isn't very risky would be worth more, even if it's earning the same as a slower, riskier business.
Exactly. And that's where having a good financial person on your team comes in. They can help you figure out a realistic value.
Okay, so we've got asset-based and income-based. What's the third one?
The market comparison approach. Kind of like how real estate agents value a house. You look at similar businesses that recently sold to see the market value.
So you find guideline companies, ones with similar size, industry, and financials, to see what our target business might be worth right now.
You got it. It's all about comparing apples to apples so you don't overpay or miss out on a good deal.
This is making sense, but it seems really complicated for someone new to buying a business.
For sure. And that's why having that expert team is so important. They can handle the complexity and find the right valuation method for you.
Okay, so let's say we've evaluated a business, the price seems good, and we want to move forward. How does the actual purchase work? It can't be as simple as just writing a check.
It's definitely not that simple. You need to decide if you're buying the company's stock or its assets. Each has different legal and financial impacts.
Okay, let's break that down. Buying stock means you're becoming a part owner of the company itself, right? While assets are the things the company uses. Equipment, inventory, even things like patents.
Exactly. It's like buying the whole basket of apples versus picking the ones you want. Let's dive into the good and bad of each. With a stock purchase, the business basically keeps running as usual. You step right into the existing structure.
Sounds smooth, especially if you want things to keep going without any big changes. But I bet there are some downsides.
You're right. The big disadvantage is you get all the company's liabilities, good and bad. Any hidden debts, legal problems, everything.
Like buying a house without an inspection. You might find some nasty surprises later. What about buying assets? What are the advantages there?
The biggest one is you get to choose. You can buy only the assets you want and maybe avoid some of the liabilities. You have more control over what you're taking on.
That sounds good, especially if you're worried about hidden problems. Are there any downsides to buying assets?
Yes, it can be more complicated legally and when it comes to taxes. More paperwork to transfer ownership, and you might miss out on some tax benefits you get with a stock purchase.
Speaking of taxes, I remember reading something about S corporations and maybe some tax advantages when buying a business. Can you explain that?
Sure. Let's say you buy stock in an S corporation with cash. Under certain conditions, you might not have to pay taxes on the value of that stock until you sell it.
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing this is where having a tax expert on our team is really important.
You got it. Tax laws are tricky, and what works in one situation might not in another. You need professional advice to structure the purchase the right way to save on taxes.
I'm starting to realize buying a business is like peeling an onion. You never know what you'll find underneath.
Great analogy. It's all about asking the right questions, doing your research, and making sure you really understand what you're getting into before you commit.
We've covered a lot, but I know we're just getting started. There's still so much to explore when it comes to buying a business.
Welcome back. Before we go any further, we should probably talk more about due diligence.
You're right. We touched on it earlier, but it's clearly important.
Yeah, it's not just about the numbers. It's about understanding the people, too. You're not just buying a business.
You're buying into a whole team, a company culture, and everything that comes with it.
Exactly. We've talked about the finances and the legal side, but what about the human side? What should buyers look for when it comes to employees and the work environment?
That's a good point. What are some things that get missed?
Employee benefits, especially retirement plans, they can be a real problem if you're not careful.
Okay, I can see how that could be tricky. Retirement plans are complicated, and I bet there are some hidden costs there. What should buyers be watching out for?
Well, let's say the business has a traditional pension plan, where they promise to pay employees even after they retire.
I know the type.
Well, the buyer has to fund those benefits, even for people who retired before the acquisition.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, and if that plan doesn't have enough money, you could be in for a huge financial headache.
So it's like a ticking time bomb. You don't know how bad it is until it explodes.
That's a good way to put it. Even with simpler plans like 401k, there can be problems. High fees, bad management, those things hurt employees and cause headaches for the new owner.
It sounds like checking the company's retirement plan and talking to a benefits expert should be high on the list.
Absolutely. You need to know how healthy the plan is, how much the company contributes, and if there are any potential problems before you sign anything.
Makes sense. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. Let's say the deal goes through. How can buyers make the transition smooth for employees and keep everyone happy during a time that's probably pretty uncertain?
Communication is key. Employees are going to have questions about their jobs, their benefits, the future of the company. The worst thing you can do is keep them in the dark.
So be transparent, even if it's not all good news. It's better than leaving people guessing and worrying.
Exactly. And it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. Empathy is important. Employees need to feel like they're being heard and respected, even if their jobs are changing or going away.
So active listening. Give people a chance to ask questions and address their concerns honestly.
Exactly. Treat people right throughout the process.
Now, what about company culture? Blending two different cultures can be tough, right?
Oh, yeah. It can be a big problem if you don't handle it right. Culture clashes can ruin even the best acquisitions.
So how can buyers and sellers work through those differences and create a place where everyone feels good?
First, acknowledge that there are differences. Don't assume everything will just work out. Take time to understand both cultures, their values, how they do things, how they communicate. Do some research, talk to employees, see how things work in each company.
Like doing your homework on the people side of the business.
Right. Once you understand the cultures, you can start planning the integration. Maybe you adapt some practices, find common ground, create a new culture that combines the best of both.
It's interesting how much more goes into buying a business than just the money part. You have to understand people, their culture, how this affects their lives.
Absolutely. And sometimes real examples explain this better than anything. Have you seen any good case studies that show this?
I have. I read about a tech company, Tech Solutions, that bought a smaller software company called Innovate. The deal was around $15 million, so right in that lower middle market range.
It sounds interesting. What were some of the key things they did?
Well, one thing that stuck out was how thorough their due diligence was. Not just the financial part, but the legal stuff too. Tech Solutions spent months looking over Innovate's contracts, agreements, legal history.
Smart move. They didn't want any legal surprises later on.
Exactly. And they found some red flags, some legal disputes with former clients that could have become Tech Solutions' problem.
That happens sometimes, but it shows why due diligence is so important.
Absolutely. In this case, Tech Solutions and their lawyers figured out the risks and made a deal with those former clients before the acquisition was final. They dodged a bullet there.
That's being proactive, and it can save you a lot of trouble and money.
Another interesting thing was how Tech Solutions handled the culture difference. Innovate was much more casual, more like a startup, while Tech Solutions was more corporate.
I can see how that could cause some problems.
But instead of making Innovate change, Tech Solutions embraced some of their more innovative ways of working. They created a separate division for Innovate's team and let them keep their own style.
That's smart. By respecting Innovate's culture, they kept key employees and made them feel good about being part of the bigger company.
It was a win-win. Tech Solutions got Innovate's technology and talent, and Innovate got the resources and stability of a larger company.
A great example of how being adaptable and flexible is just as important as due diligence in making an acquisition successful.
Now let's talk about money. Acquisitions are expensive, especially in the lower middle market where we're talking millions of dollars. How do buyers typically pay for these things?
There are a few ways. For smaller deals, or if the buyer has a lot of cash, they might use their own funds. But for bigger deals, most buyers need outside help.
So what are the most common ways to get the money for an acquisition?
One is a bank loan, specifically for buying a business, called an acquisition loan. Banks look at the financials of both the buyer and the company being bought, along with how likely the acquisition is to succeed before they give a loan.
Because banks want to make sure they're lending money to a good investment, not something risky.
Exactly. Now, if a buyer doesn't have good credit or enough assets to guarantee a bank loan, they might try private equity firms.
Okay, remind me, what exactly are private equity firms and how are they involved in acquisitions?
They're basically investment funds that pool money from rich people and institutions to invest in companies. They often specialize in acquisitions, and they bring more than just money. They have expertise, connections, and strategic guidance.
Like a financial partner with deep pockets and tons of experience buying and selling businesses.
Exactly. But they expect a big return on their investment. They typically take part ownership of the company and work with management to make it more valuable, hoping to sell their share later for a profit.
So it's a partnership, but the private equity firm has a big stake in the company's success.
Right. That can be good or bad. Private equity can bring resources and help grow the business, but they can also have a big influence on decisions.
So choose a private equity partner whose vision aligns with yours and who you're comfortable working with. It's like choosing a business partner, you have to be compatible.
I couldn't agree more. And speaking of partnerships, let's not forget the legal side of acquisitions. It can be complicated, and having the right legal help is crucial.
For sure. What are some key legal things buyers and sellers should know?
One of the first things is a thorough legal due diligence review. That means looking at all the contracts, agreements, permits, licenses, and other legal documents to make sure everything's legal and identify any potential risks.
Like making sure everything is signed and legal before you close the deal.
Exactly. That includes things like employment agreements, intellectual property rights, environmental regulations, and tax compliance.
That's a lot to handle. Having a good lawyer on your team is a must.
Absolutely. They can help you navigate the legal complexities, spot potential problems, and negotiate good terms in the purchase agreement.
Speaking of that, the purchase agreement is the document that lays out all the terms and conditions of the sale, right?
Right. It's the most important document covering everything. Purchase price, how you'll pay, closing date, any promises made by the seller.
So it's basically the rule book for the whole deal.
Exactly. You need a lawyer to review and negotiate this agreement to make sure your interests are protected.
Once that's signed, we move on to the closing, right?
Yeah.
That's where the business officially changes hands.
You got it. The closing is usually a celebration, but it's not the end of the work.
Right. The real work often starts after the deal is done, with merging operations, cultures, and employee transitions. It's a whole new chapter.
Absolutely. It's not just about buying the business. It's about making sure it thrives under the new owner.
Well, we've covered a lot in this deep dive, from the details of due diligence to financing and cultural integration. It's been a really insightful look at buying a business.
And we're not done yet. We'll wrap things up in part 3 with some key takeaways and final thoughts for anyone thinking about buying a business.
We're back for the final part of our deep dive into buying an existing business.
We've covered a lot of ground, but it's only useful if you can actually put it into practice.
Right, so let's turn all this info into some actionable tips. For those ready to jump in, what are the top 3 things to remember?
First and foremost, do your homework. Due diligence is absolutely essential.
Don't rush into it just because you're excited. It's a big decision.
Exactly. Dig into the financials. Go over those contracts with a fine-tooth comb, talk to customers, know your competition, and don't be afraid to ask tough questions.
Get expert advice if you need it, and walk away if something feels off.
It's better to walk away from a bad deal than end up stuck with a business that's a bigger headache than you expected.
Absolutely. Okay, what's number 2?
Make sure the business aligns with your goals, both personal and financial. It's not just about a good deal, it's about the right deal for you.
It's kind of like picking a career path.
Yeah.
You want something you care about, something that fits your values and your long-term vision.
Exactly. And lastly, remember that negotiation isn't just about the price tag. The terms of the deal are just as important. Having a good lawyer is crucial here.
Because things like payment terms, warranties, non-compete clauses, those details can really make a difference down the line.
It's like building a strong foundation for a partnership. You need clear expectations, fairness, and a shared understanding of what you're all trying to achieve.
This has been such a deep dive. It feels like we've only scratched the surface, though.
It really is just the beginning. Business is always changing, and there's always more to learn. But hopefully, this gives you a good starting point.
Before we go, one last thing to think about. How might buying a business change your lifestyle, your values, your future? Something to really consider as you start this journey.
A great point. Buying a business is more than just a business decision. It's a life decision.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Keep learning and keep exploring.
Thinking of exiting your business or taking on a private equity partner to help you grow faster? BizNexus has you covered. Tap into our network of thousands of best-fit investors, acquirers, and proven M&A advisors, and we'll help you begin the relationship confidentially on your terms, your timeline. Learn more at biznexus.com.